The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone. Hopefully you can hear me loud and clear, and you should be able to see my screen. We're going to get started in about 4 minutes. If someone could just let me know whether you can hear me okay, that would be great. It helps me out. Sorry, and you can use the question and answer box or the chat box. Yeah, perfect. Awesome. Thanks, James. Again, welcome. So today we're just going to cover some Hunchly desktop stuff. If we have some time at the end, of course, I always like to dive off into some other topics or maybe show some Altigo, or sometimes folks ask questions and we get talking about other stuff. So feel free to introduce yourself. Let me know where you're from. It's always cool. We usually have representation from all over the place. Hey, Brad, good to see you. Awesome. You've got some background noise. Anybody else got background noise from me? Yeah? Okay, let's see here. I just have a microphone gain issue. How's that? Better? Background noise? No background noise? Better? 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 Okay, hold on. Let me try it again. Better, 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 better. Can you still hear me? Still hear it when I speak. Back sometime. Let's try this. How's that? It's still back? Off and on, hey? Weird. No background. Let me maybe just dial in so that we're not fighting with this later on, and I'll monkey with my mic. So. Okay, welcome everyone. We are doing a Hunchly desktop training session today. My name is Justin Seitz. I'm the ringleader at Dark River Systems who builds Hunchly. And I'm going to just walk you through how Hunchly desktop works, try to cover as much of it as possible. We don't cover every single aspect and nook and cranny in an hour, but I do try to get through most of it. And of course, please ask tons of questions. The question and answer box is open to you. I will prompt and take lots of breaks to make sure that if you have questions as I go, that I can address them and answer them. And I leave the floor open at the end of the session. We kind of hang out until all of the questions are answered. And I'm also happy to demonstrate some other stuff like Maltigo or whatever if time permits. So hopefully you can hear me and see my screen. If you run into any audio and visual issues from now until the end of the webinar, I will not be able to assist you with them. But if you can see my screen, you should be looking at the Hunchly dashboard. So Hunchly is actually a two-part system. And when I say two-part, I mean one is this dashboard that you're looking at right now. This is a separate application that allows you to create cases, manage the materials you've captured. And then there's the other part that lives in your browser. And the part that lives in your browser, and really the core functionality of Hunchly, is that it follows you around and it captures every page that you browse to, timestamps it, and preserves it on your hard drive so that it is court ready and it is not being stored out there in the cloud somewhere on some open Amazon bucket. It is yours. It's a permanent copy. And it removes the burden from the investigator of having to remember to take screenshots or note URLs or when they did something at what date and time. So now that we've got all of that little background covered, let's actually get started with Hunchly. As if we just installed it for the first time and we're about to start our first new case, what do we actually do? So the first thing we need to do is actually create a case. So this is important whether you're doing court-related work, stuff that actually needs to be submitted to court or not. Having cases logically separates your page captures, which is really important. So we're going to start a new case just by clicking that plus button in the top left. And in the Add New Case dialog, we are going to add Justin Seitz, me. So we always investigate me on these webinars to maximize my personal embarrassment. And that's it. If you really don't pay attention to anything else on the dashboard for the rest of this session, that's totally fine, because creating a case is really simple and important, and it only takes a second. Just remember that part. So I've opened up Google Chrome. Now remember I said the other part of Hunchly lives in your browser, and when I say browser, I mean anything Chromium based. So Hunchly supports Chromium, Google Chrome, Microsoft Edge, and the privacy-focused Brave, as well as any other weird browsers that might be out there based on Chromium. We do not support Firefox because Firefox does not have the kind of the little pieces in the engine that allow us to do the evidence capture. So we would love to, but just remember that Hunchly is a Chromium-based tool, so you have to use on a Chromium-based browser. Now, when we first open it up, what we're going to see here is this little icon right here. Now, if you don't see this icon and instead you just see this puzzle piece, well, you can click on this puzzle piece and you'll be able to just pin the extension here. Okay? Cool. So when we click the Hunchly extension, there's really only 2 mouse clicks here that are super critical. The first is this capture switch. So currently the capture is disabled, and when we turn it on, you're going to see the Chrome extension is now lit up. And what this is telling you is that the automatic capture system is enabled and ready to go. So you can start browsing, and Hunchly is going to collect pages as you go. And of course, disabling it will gray it out, make it angry looking, much like myself. And the other thing we need to note here is just picking the right case. We want to make sure that our page captures go into the right case when we're actually out doing our work. So that's it. A couple of mouse clicks, you can create a new case, turn the capture on, pick the correct case, and now we're ready to go. So let's just start at Google. And I've actually already trained you on evidence capture. That's it. So in the background, what happened was Hunchly captured this page, timestamped it, hashed it, stored it all on disk, and did a bunch of other slicing and dicing on some of the content that's underneath it, all without us having to think about it or do anything. But of course, it's not too useful to just run it like that. You want to obviously do a Google search, same thing. Now this page has been captured. So every time you move page to page, Hunchly is watching for both changes in URL and changes on the page itself. So if we take a look back at our dashboard, we're going to see some things have changed, right? We now see pages viewed 2, we've done 1 search, and down here we can see our history view. And this is probably where you'll spend the bulk of your time kind of moseying around, looking for, you know, things that are of interest or doing case review. And so this history view is really useful. You'll see later we can do some sorting on it. We can, there's little tools built into it as well. By clicking on a page, we get taken to the page review screen. So this is a permanent copy of this page. Whether we look at this Hunchly case today or 10 years from now, this is always going to look the same, all of this. For the record, that's not me. There's a male model with the same name as me, and now it's great. He's getting promoted up there by me. Certainly not me, as you can tell by the nerdy looking dude beside him. So the cool thing is too with the MHTML capture in Hunchly is that all of this text is stored and analyzed, and these links are even still active. So I can click on it and be taken exactly to this link where that link was pointing to. Now it is not taking a capture of that O'Reilly link. It is simply just pointing me to where it is, but it is still useful because at times you can have social media posts, for example, or you can have even Google results that might get removed. And you want to be able to see where those links pointed to back then. And a screenshot doesn't capture links, right? Because links are part of HTML. So very useful. Sorry, I took us out of the page review screen. So this is the content. You have the source. So the MHTML actually looks a lot like email. In fact, when you use Python to parse our pages, you use the email package in Python to parse them because that's exactly how they're structured. So very cool. Also, if you're using other tools like e-discovery tools, if you set your ingestion methods to email, you'll probably get better results pulling pages in. Just an FYI. And we also have the JavaScript. So sometimes there can be little indicators or clues that is stored in the JavaScript. We do our very best to capture as much of it as we can and pull it down into the page. So this can be particularly useful if you're a cybersecurity researcher, for example, and you're looking for either exploit code or you're looking for a particular piece of kit. It might be in this JavaScript that's been captured. Cool. Now the other thing is that this information panel that's hidden by default also contains all of the information that you would need if you're ever called to the stand to actually have to discuss what you've discovered, to actually testify. And if you think about it, the big thing is, what did you see, which is the content, where did you see it, the full URL, when did you see it, the date and time. And this hash will allow you to transmit this page when you export it. You can transmit it to a third party, provide that hash. They can then also hash the file on their side, and then they can validate that the act of transmission did not alter the evidence in any way, okay? Now, the other thing I'll note here is that we have two timestamps. We have a timestamp of when you land on the page and the first capture is generated, and then we have an updated timestamp. Now, on Google, because the entire page loads all at once, the timestamps are the same. There's nothing to update. But as you scroll down a Facebook page, Hunchly will detect new content has been loaded. As you scroll through maybe an auto trading website or some other site that has dynamic content, as you scroll down and that content gets loaded, Hunchly will do a capture every time it detects that new content coming in. So then you will also see an updated timestamp here telling you the last time that that capture occurred. So there's a 30-minute window in Hunchly. After 30 minutes, it'll stop updating the same capture and actually generate a fresh capture in Hunchly as well. All right, so I'm going to now just take a brief pause, have a sip of coffee, and I'm going to look at the Q&A box to see we've got a couple of questions, and then we will continue on to some of the investigative tools now that we know how to capture pages. Cool. So what do we got here in the Q&A? Let me grab my coffee cup here. I don't think you need to hear me sipping. All right, so the first question, if a page gets removed in the future, will this still remain on the software and can I open it and navigate to it? Yes, so for example, let's say this page, this O'Reilly page, tomorrow they remove this page, right? So we go to browse there in Google Chrome as usual and it's just gone, right? We get a 404. The cool thing is that we can just open Hunchly and come back to what the page looked like today. Or yesterday, I guess it would have been, because we have this permanent copy here. This is coming off of our hard drive. So we're always able to review this page exactly like it was. So I often tell people this is like your own personal Wayback Machine. You always are going to have a copy of that page. Okay? So hopefully that helps to answer that. And that's really one of the big benefits of Hunchly is that once you've browsed to it and saw it, it's yours permanently. It's stored on your hard drive. You're always going to have a copy of it, so somebody can delete their content or whatever, and that's not a big deal. And that's originally when I built Hunchly years ago. It was because I was doing terrorism research, and what you would find is that you would have an account that was really active, and then something would happen, and then they would get suspended or they would drop their account, and I needed something to be preserving that stuff because I was bad at it. So hopefully that helps to answer that question. Cool. Awesome. All right. Question here, do you have to pay to use Hunchly? Yes, Hunchly is a paid tool, so it is $129.99 Canadian dollars per year. So I'm not really here to kind of sell you anything today, but yeah, it's a paid tool. It's not free, although we do have a number of free things like a dark web mailing list and Maltego transforms and a whole bunch of other stuff. The product itself is actually paid. It's $129.99 Canadian per year. All right, cool. That looks like everything for questions. I'm just going to have one more sip here. I'm a bit parched this morning. All right. Cool. Oh, I have a question. What is Maltego? You know what, Kelly, if we have time at the end, I will field that more fully so that I can do it some justice. But we just did an entire webinar, myself and Andrew Fordred, on Hunchly and Maltego together. Andy does a really kind of advanced demo, but I can dive into that towards the end. All right, moving on. So we know how to capture pages in Hunchly. We know kind of the fundamentals of what Hunchly's job is and why it's useful. Now let's talk about some of the ways we can make your life easier as an investigator. And the first one, and arguably I would say my favorite, is the selector system. So what selectors are just keywords that describe your subject of investigation. So a keyword might be something like a name. It might be a social media user handle. It might be a phone number. Now, pro tip with phone numbers, use the last 4 digits. Don't try to do the whole thing because phone numbers are represented in a bazillion different ways. So try using the last 4 digits. You might get some false positives. But let's use that as also as a selector. Now, what we're doing here is actually telling Hunchly that these are 3 important pieces of information. So the first thing Hunchly does with that information is it searches backwards through your case, looking for any instances of Justin Seitz, JMS.py, and 5555, the last 4 digits of my phone number. And what it's telling you here is that it's got hits on these pages for those terms. Okay, very useful. Now, when we only have 3 pages and we're on a short little training session, it's not obviously useful. But when you've collected 500 pages and you punch a new email address in as a selector and it comes back with 10 hits, that's telling you that you had actually encountered that information in the past in your investigation. You just didn't know it was important then, or you didn't notice it, right? So this little thing right here where it's doing this historical search backwards is actually really useful. Now, the other thing that we can do is we can kind of dig into them and say, okay, well, I just want to see the ones that are Justin Seitz, for example. You can mix and match them as well. But the other cool thing is that now as I go browsing, when I switch back to my browser, every web page I browse to, Hunchly is scanning all of the content and source code looking for Justin Seitz, JMS.py, and 5555 all on its own, and it will automatically track hits for me. So as I'm browsing, it is keeping tabs on where all of my most important information is showing up, and it's bringing that to me in the dashboard here. Now, before we jump back to the browser, I do want to point a setting out to you. I use this setting personally. So it is highlight selectors. So what this will do when you turn it on is it will highlight the hits right in the document, right on the page for you as you're browsing. So it's really obvious where the selector hits are. Now, if you're in law enforcement, you're going to use on, remove before storing. The reason why is because with on, this is actually going to store the highlighting permanently in my archive. So you won't want that because you just won't want that. When you're preparing court materials, you don't want highlighting all over your materials. So you'll want to use that other setting. I'm going to just set it to on so you can see what it looks like. Now, there's a little trick here in that we've had to make some changes in Hunchly and how it works with the browser. So if you make some major changes in the settings and you got a browser session going, I always recommend kicking your browser and jumping back in if you can. Most of the time it's not an issue for me because I'm just on like a Facebook profile. I just pop back in. It's to make sure the settings get fully refreshed because believe it or not, there's actually quite a complex little queue of messages that have to flow between your browser and the background. If you're ever interested, you can see what Hunchly is working on by looking at this queue. So refreshing your settings helps, refreshing your session, helps to just make sure that those settings make it in. And you can already see the selector matching took off there pretty quickly in my auto typing. So again, Hunchly is here making it very obvious where those hits, where those terms are for me. Less important on a Google search result page, but when you're on like a huge forum, or if you've been reading for hours, which is like basically what OSINT is, right? Your eyes and your brain get tired. And so that highlighting helps to kind of wake you up a little bit to say, hey, there's something important to look at. So it's going to do this for me everywhere we go. It's going to be tracking hits to those pages and letting us know. So we can see that with this blue badge. And again, it can become quite powerful for analytical work. If I wanted to add a known associate, so Esme Seitz is my tortoiseshell cat. So let's say that we were both criminals. We could say Justin Seitz and Esme Seitz. So show me any of the pages where both of these names are present. This could mean that we're both directors in a company. It could mean we're chatting back and forth on a social media platform. Little things like this can actually be really useful for slicing and dicing and analyzing your selectors. All right, so those are selectors. Again, use them. Every case will have a selector. You're always investigating something, right? So there's always something, a company name, a location, a phone number. Enter it in, build some muscle memory around using them because they are incredibly useful and they will tease out insights for you that you may miss. All right, let me switch back to the Q&A box and answer some questions. Perfect. The price you just mentioned is for one user / multiple devices. Yes, sorry. So the licensing with Hunchly works per user, and that user can install Hunchly on as many devices, virtual or otherwise, as they want. So it's just tied to a user. So if you have an investigator, that investigator with a Hunchly license can install it as many times as they want. If you have a second investigator that comes along that wants to use that copy of Hunchly, they need a license too, right? So it's tied to the number of humans using it. All right. And we don't do all of that crazy online license key verification stuff. Our license keys are offline. So we tend to put our trust in our customers because if our customers steal our software from us, then it's not really in a position for us to improve it for them. So it works both ways. We trust them. We keep working on the product. Cool. Hopefully that helps. All right. Can the software advise Can the software advise whether we are breaching any privacy rights when we add additional info? No. So Hunchly is used universally across the globe in every continent except for Antarctica. So that means that we have to run completely kind of generic. There's no specific language around any type of privacy laws in the EU versus the US. There's no specific, nothing is specific because the laws and how things are handled in courts are completely different. And the privacy laws between provinces, even here in Canada, are different, and the privacy laws between Canada and the US are different. So it's always important to remember what we do is we consult with all of our customers across the globe to make sure that we're producing evidence and building a tool that is universally used and accepted in the courts. I'm also a member of some advisory boards, both for the International Criminal Court and others, where we talk about digital evidence and its acceptance and how to maintain privacy and all of those things. And so all of that, of course, is taken into consideration as we build Hunchly and as we work with our customers. But no, we do not do anything that is law specific in any jurisdiction. All right, so hopefully that helps, because I know we do get questions around like, is this acceptable in the US versus Australia? We have built it to be acceptable globally. Cool. All right, I don't see any other questions. I'll leave the Maltego one up. Perfect. Okay, let's move on to tags. So tags are a way for you to keep your cases organized, particularly if you work in law enforcement. When you're going to do disclosure for a court case, you do not want to have to dig through 1,000 pages. You want to be able to just dive into the tags that were set up so that you can easily find the stuff that you need. So how do we use tags? Well, first we need to create a couple. Then you can be broad or specific. So for example, you could have social media. You could also have one that's like posts with weapons. All right, so now what this is going to allow me to do is as I'm browsing, I can be categorizing content as I go, which will help me later on to be able to drill down into content when I'm doing reporting or when I'm doing court disclosure. So for example, this is a social media site. I'm going to tag this. So by doing this, I'm going to click on the extension. I'm going to go into tags, and I'm going to say social media. I could say posts with weapons because of my steely brown eyes. Why not? Thankfully, none of my colleagues are probably listening to this from work right now. So the cool thing is that when we're back here in our dashboard, we can easily see what pages are tagged, what they're tagged with. We can drill down into content. So we can say, just show me all of the social media posts. We can say, show me all the social media posts that have the selector hit for Justin, for example. Now, later on, we can also do export. So we can say, export only the social media posts. Or if you need to, you can also go in and modify the tags. So if you don't need to export something, or you realize when you export it, like, oh, that wasn't actually supposed to be tagged that way, we can untag it. And now that will no longer be included in that export. So we're going to cover exports towards the end of the presentation. But again, remembering that tags are a way to keep your cases organized. If you're running a quick case, it's just like there's an incident, you just need to go capture a couple of social media pages. No need to set up tags, right? It's obvious it's a quick incident capture thing, and we have lots of people that do that. The real thing here is that when you start getting into anything that's moderately complex, 50, 100 pages is already like, you should probably have some tags set up. And once you get used to tagging things and kind of filing them away, it'll make your life easier. And definitely later when you're trying to find things, it will make your life easier. Now, the other thing you can do as well, and I use this one, not everybody does, but I'll mark pages as important. So what you can do here is there's this gold star right beside the case dropdown. I'm going to click that. That's going to mark this page as important. We can see this gold star show up here. I encourage people I work with, if I'm working on a case or a fraud investigation, to use it, because then I can just smack this button here and it shows me all of their important pages, the stuff they thought was the most key things from the case. And again, later on, I can export pages based on this important marker or not. All right, cool. So those are tags. Very simple, very easy to use, but really, particularly if you're doing complex cases, will really save you a ton of effort later on. All right, I'm going to move on to notes, and then we'll cover some more questions. So categorizing content with tags is great. Notes is the specific way to categorize and add context to things that you're seeing while you're investigating. So how we take notes is very simple. While we're on a page like this, using either a keyboard shortcut, or you can right-click, Hunchly 2.0, take note. This is going to give you a little dialog box where you can punch in some information. So we can say Justin's LinkedIn profile. Perfect. That's it. And this is exactly what I do when I'm investigating. Anytime I discover something new, I take a note of it. Now, what Hunchly does is takes a screenshot of the viewable area in the browser, does a full content capture behind the scenes, and timestamps everything, keeps your text for you. So what you're going to end up with is this chronological list of notes as you've been investigating and you're building your case. It's actually a great way to both visually and kind of in context scroll through and read how you got to where you got to or what you found was important. Sometimes I go back and reread my notes and I'm like, oh my God, I never circled back on this thing. Like I didn't go back and review this other company that I had discovered because I was kind of down this other rabbit hole at the time. So they're super useful both to kind of keep track of what you've been looking at and what's important, but they're also the main way that if you're going to use our report builder, this is how you get content into our report builder, is through the use of notes. Now it's going to change soon, but for now, notes are the way you get content into the report builder. All right. Now, much the same way as tags, you can always retroactively go back in and take a note. So if we're here on this page and we wanted to take a note of this retroactively, I can say add note, Google results for Justin. And actually, I've had to do this before where I'm watching somebody because stuff is disappearing online. So I would take snapshots like this of their results just to remind myself. Cool. You can also automatically drive a browser with Hunchly along for the ride if you want to get fancy someday. So you can see this is a nice little chronologically ordered. I can just work my way down the list, be able to go back through all of that important stuff in context. So very useful. Again, this is something I use a ton. Selectors and notes, 100, like 10 out of 10 investigations of mine, I use them. I don't do like situational, something happened, take 10 screenshots kind of thing, but every single time, notes, selectors, always. All right, cool. Let's jump over to the Q&A. I'm going to have a quick sip of water. All right, so we have, when your subscription expires, can you still open the software to work with your data that's stored on your drive? Yeah, you can still open your dashboard. You just can't capture new materials. So you can't add new pages to it or like go out and capture new materials with it, but you can review any of your old cases. And better than that is when you export a case from Hunchly, you actually don't need Hunchly anymore to do case review. I'll show you there's an embedded report right in the case export. So even if for some reason you were unable to install Hunchly, you could always just open your case export and review it. Perfect. Perfect. All right, another great question here, actually. What is the capture option in the context menu, and why is this required if you're already capturing the visible content on the screen? Well, let me show you. So sometimes there are instances where people will actually want to run their investigation like this, where the automatic capture is disabled, and they only want to capture the stuff that they are really keen on capturing. So then what they do is they go in and I want to capture this page, right? Now, the other thing is, sometimes you're going to encounter a web page where there's like stuff on the page that loads and then unloads. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, others can also run into this. So if you have a situation where you're on a site and even with automatic capture turned on and content kind of appears and disappears, when content's there, you can just wait, stop right there, capture, and it will force a capture. So at least when the content is present that you need, you can force a capture at that time, because Hunchly has to try to run against 100% of the web. And it's not always going to be able to get the capture timing right. Sometimes things will happen that we just don't see. And that's just the nature of modern websites. So that manual capture option is really useful. Also, you'll see in some future webinars, but if you're driving a web browser through automation using Python, you'll want to be able to manually trigger captures sometimes, not always rely on the automatic capture. All right, cool. Another great question. Any other integrations beside Maltego, like some threat intel platform, MISP or the like? Yes, totally. So we actually have a thing called data forwarding, Jan. So data forwarding Hunchly actually ships data out of Hunchly while you're capturing pages in JSON to an HTTP endpoint. So that can be Elasticsearch, it can be a Splunk receiver, it can be, we've sent it to, I do stuff with Google Cloud. We also do training, actually, and we'll talk more about this at the end, but we train people on how to write their own, if only I could type, how to write their own data forwarders using Python. So you can, this Hunchly and Flask automation course, for example, will teach you how to do this. So you can write local data forwarders. I have one I've done before, which will download YouTube videos for me because Hunchly does not extract video to stay on the right side of copyright. It doesn't rip video or audio. So I built a data forwarder that just uses Python to do it for me. So yes, there are people who have done integrations like that. If you have a platform specific request, send me an email. It's just justin@hunch.ly. I'll send that to everyone. So yeah, people are doing some really neat stuff. And I myself have started to build up some neat tooling, doing everything from image analysis to natural language processing. So cool. All right. Excellent. Take one more sip and then we'll carry on. Saskatchewan is such a dry place. It's like you're constantly parched. All right, perfect. Let's talk about images. So there's a few cool things that happen here with images in Hunchly. And the first is every page you browse to, we actually extract every image off the page, hash it, and store it separately. So in your Hunchly data folder, what you actually end up with is you end up with this entire corpus of photos and images and icons and things that have pulled off of every page that we found, and they're hashed. So for our law enforcement customers, what this allows them to do is grab this folder and chuck it directly into their image analysis platforms. There are others who will run, they write tooling that will do things like TinEye, reverse searches, and other things against it. And the other cool thing is that if there are any images that have EXIF metadata present in them, we also pull this forward for you. So this photo of me actually has some EXIF in it. Okay, it tells you the date and time digitized in the original. For those of you who have never heard of EXIF metadata before, it's just invisible information stamped into images that describes the image, right? So that's what metadata means, is it's data that describes the data. So in this case, EXIF metadata is data that describes this image, when it was taken, and it will also tell you other things like what kind of phone, for example. There might be a GPS location. Thank you so much for that coffee. I just got a coffee desk delivered. I'm a very lucky fella. Perfect. Because you probably tell I had to switch to water in the middle there. All right. So the cool thing is this EXIF metadata is really useful from an investigative standpoint, but you do have to kind of use it with caution because people can manipulate it, or they could throw something in here like a GPS coordinate that points to a different place than where it actually is. If you're ever interested in testing kind of where there's image metadata present, a good place is arstechnica.com. Their images on their homepage generally are chock full of EXIF metadata, tons and tons of all different kinds. So it's kind of a neat little test that you can use. Here we go. We can see some of them starting to come in. So Hunchly will do this analysis for you automatically, and then you're able to go through. Again, this is really interesting as well when you're browsing in the dark web. Hunchly works totally fine when you proxy through Tor, so you can take Hunchly along for the ride doing dark web stuff. And of course, if you see any metadata popping out from images in the dark web, that can be interesting. All right, now the other thing that we can do when we've encountered an image is we can actually right-click on that image. And if it's actually, and that's an interesting thing right there. So that wasn't considered an image. And you'll notice this too on Instagram. If you try to right-click on an Instagram image, your browser doesn't notice it's an image. They put a transparent layer over top of it so that they can display information to you like number of views or plays, but also it prevents people from yanking images using their browser. All right, so I'm going to right-click on this image and I'm going to add a caption to it. So Activision image. So what this is going to do is isolate this image out, pull it out for me. It's also going to give me, in this caption images view, I've added some context. It's timestamped. It's always linked back to the full page capture, but I'm also able to grab caption images in our report builder. So I'm able to grab this image and pull it into a report if I want to use it later. So again, if you're doing asset tracing or fraud investigations, I use this, and great spelling, Justin, by the way. I use this all the time to, like, here's a yacht, here's their house, here's their private island. So that type of thing works for those types of investigations. I do a lot of image captioning. All right, cool. So I don't see any other questions. So I'm just going to keep trucking. And we even have enough time here to dive a bit deeper into attachments. So attachments in Hunchly are a way for you to get anything that's not a web page into Hunchly. So this is PDFs, Word docs, if you download something. So if you download a virus sample, if you download a video, anything, you can have Hunchly add those as attachments to your case file. Okay, so this is really useful. And I'll also show you on Hunchly Mobile how this can work. It's just a 5-minute kind of dovetail to show you how that works. It may be of use for some of you. All right, so to start, the first way that we can add an attachment to Hunchly is just manually. So we can click the add button, pick a file from our hard drive. That's going to copy byte for byte, bring the file into our case. It's going to hash it for us. So if we need to submit it as evidence later, that's taken care of. We can add a description, which I always recommend you do. So this is like smudge being bottle fed. And if you want to view the file, you click it. Now, remember, if you click OK here, read this warning. And if you click OK and it's a virus sample or it's something that's nasty, it's going to execute and infect you. So in this case, it's a JPEG. It's an image of my own. I can trust it. So I'm going to hit OK. And that will just kick open whatever the browser or whatever application it is. So there's me bottle feeding one of the raccoon rescues here in Saskatoon. Cool. So that's the first way, is to add attachments manually. It's really useful because of those hashes. I like this. I like it just to keep stuff straight. Andrew Fordred in the last webinar, actually, what he does is when he's done with his Maltego case, he exports his Maltego graph, and then he takes the Maltego file and he actually brings it in as an attachment to his Hunchly case. Then he exports the Hunchly case. It's a neat little trick, but it's a great way to keep all of his investigative data in one place. All right, so that's the first way of getting them in. The second way is you can actually set a setting here, attach downloads. So if I turn the setting on, what this will do for me, and again, I'm just going to make sure that setting gets pushed across. I use this setting personally. Like, I turn it on by default in any new Hunchly install. And the reason is that anytime I download a file now, it's going to automatically get attached for me. So I'm just going to go file type docx, and we'll go puppies. We'll just pick a random Word document to download. I was actually running into some Google Chrome issues with downloads and Word documents for like about a month, and I think they cleared up finally, but let's take a look here. Cool. So what's happened is I downloaded it in my browser. Hunchly detects the download, picks it up, makes a copy of it, tells you where you downloaded it from, right? What's the URL? That's important. And then we can also add some context here if we need to. All right. So that's really useful. Again, PDFs will also land in here as you browse. Any PDFs you browse are going to land in this attachments tab. Now, the other thing is that Hunchly Mobile also allows you to use your mobile device to build case exports so that you can bring them in as attachments. Now, the thing with mobile devices is that we can't actually do full web capture like we can on a desktop device. It's just not, they just don't work the same way, and their security model doesn't allow it. But what we have built is, and I have to actually pick the physical phone up here, so I apologize if things get a little nasty here. But what we have to do is basically, we've built a tool that allows you to take screenshots, screen recordings, anything that you've got on a mobile device, put it into a case in a sound manner, and be able to export it off a mobile device and import it into Hunchly. Or, as it was designed for victims and witnesses, you can literally just export right off of Hunchly Mobile and send it to an investigating officer or a lawyer. So Hunchly Mobile is available at the iOS and Android stores. It's totally free. You don't need a subscription to desktop Hunchly to use it. It's not designed to make money, but I'm just going to show you how it works real quick. So I'm going to tap the Hunchly app, fire it up. I see some questions coming in. I will get there for sure. All right, so this is just the default Hunchly mobile view. I'm going to tap new case. I'm going to say Justin Seitz, and this is how I name them. Mobile, it's just named the same as my desktop case. I just add mobile to it. Go add case. All right, I just have to make a quick adjustment to my screen. One sec here. Sorry, make sure that there's just one setting applied here because it looks a little wonky on my side. All right, let's get this back rolling. Should be okay. Cool. Sorry about that. Sometimes the little mobile screen looks a little wonky on my side. All right. So we're going to add a new case file. Tap that button right in the middle of the screen. So again, right in the middle of the screen, add new case file. And this is it. So I'm going to add a file. I'm going to pick a photo. I have a screenshot of Google that I'm going to add. All right. So I've just picked it. That's from my Photos app on my phone. You'll be able to go in and pick whatever photo, video, screen recording, whatever you need. I'm going to add a note. So just, Google. See, this is where the typing. Here we go. Let's try this. Google. Okay. Google BS. Perfect. Period. Done. Save file the case. So now that file has been saved to this Hunchly mobile case, and I can keep adding files or anything else that I want. They're sorted along the bottom there. You can tap them. I don't want to go too far into this. I'm just going to now get this back. I'm going to say export. I tap the little hamburger menu in the top right of the app, and I'm going to say export Justin Seitz mobile. I'm going to airdrop it to my MacBook Pro, and if all goes well, I should be able to accept that, and then I will show you what it looks like on our desktop. Get the GoToMeeting windows out of the way. That's always like a major, GoToMeeting is like a complete window rodeo half the time when you're managing it. I don't know why they have those persistent windows that stick out on top all the time. Not my fave. All right, let's get this. Just got to bring this file back in. Sorry, you're probably still looking at my mobile. Don't worry, I'm just transferring files around so you can have a quick look. Maybe not. This is always the fun thing with these, with the Hunchly mobile demos is really the fun part of it is getting files from the mobile device to your laptop and into the VM, which apparently is gonna not be my thing today. So what we're gonna do instead, I'm gonna pop you back here, get screen sharing going. Yeah, you should be able to see my VM again. I have returned, my glorious return. I see a question or two coming in there as well. That's good. Cool. So what I needed to do was actually, and I'll simulate this effectively so that I can save you the pain of me trying to copy files across because it's taking much slower than it should. But effectively what you get is you get produced just a zip file. And it's the identical zip file when we do exports here in Hunchly. So I'm going to show you this now. So when we export a case in Hunchly, it's going to look exactly like a mobile case export. Everything is identical. And the cool thing is when we open these exports, mobile or desktop, and on Windows, you want to go right click, extract all. Mac, you can just double click the zip file. So this is a case export. It's a little more full than a mobile one. A mobile one's going to be a little slimmer because there's just attachments in it. But the cool thing is this report. So in both cases, we can open this report. I use Chrome to do it so I can view the HTML files. And much the same way, your mobile report produces the exact same thing. Your attachments tab will be full in a mobile report. In our normal desktop one, we can see everything here that we want, right? All the pages are here. We have notes, photos that we've captioned, our case attachments. Again, mobile case attachments you import in the source field, you'll see mobile, okay? Hunchly mobile. This is really nice. Now, the other cool thing is that if I click this link right here, this is actually the capture from my hard drive. this does not require an internet connection. So I'm actually going to drop the internet connection to this machine just to show this to you. Okay, so there's no internet. Every demo must require one cactus jump. I'm sorry, it just has to happen or else bad things will happen to us. There we go. That's it. It's my little superstition. You can see no internet. I'm going to refresh this page. This is your permanent copy. Okay, so this is really nice. You are always going to have the ability to send a zip file to anyone, and they can go through the permanent copy of what you captured, what you saw on that exact day. Okay, no Hunchly required. Just a Google Chrome browser to be able to render those MHTML files nicely. All right, so really nice. And again, when you need to import these back in, much the same way when you're importing a Hunchly mobile case, this is identical. You go add case, import case. You can import it as a new case, or you can add it to an existing case. When I'm importing a mobile case, I always just add it to my existing. I don't keep them separate. I just bring the mobile right in as if it's associated to my desktop case. You pick the zip file off of your hard drive. That's it. Click OK, import, and it will bring all the materials back in. So that means you can send a case to a colleague, they can import it themselves, you can import it later on, 2 years later. I mean, most stuff that's captured today won't see court for 18 to 24 months. So that's one of the realities, and that's why it's really nice. You can export your case, back it up somewhere, and then you're able to always bring it back in later on and view the materials. All right, cool. So we dovetailed off there to cover Hunchly Mobile. Go download it and try it. There are times where it's unavoidable. You got to go to mobile, and you got to jump on some app that there's no nice way of capturing. So what I do, turn on the video recording in I have an Android phone and an iOS phone, depending on what I need to do. I just turn the native screen recording on my iOS device, go do my thing in the app I need to do, turn the recording off, and then I just add the recording to my mobile case and bring it over. Cool. Let's talk about some questions. All right, let me just read this one first. All right. How are the hashes performed? In particular, so that the hashes are comparable to those that exist in other areas, right? So that they're acceptable. Yeah, so we use a SHA-256 hash, which is accepted in all courts internationally. Many people still use MD5, that's totally fine. SHA-1 is totally fine. We use SHA-256, always did. That's because it is the most forward compliant hash that we have right now, and largely the potential for collision or other issues long-term is extremely low. So SHA-256, fully accepted, and there are numerous tools out there to do SHA-256 hashing. All right, cool, hopefully that helps that. All right, so if a website deletes images and the images are still captured in Hunchly, I'm sorry, I'm not, Melissa, I'm not 100% clear on the question. So if you capture a page in Hunchly, it captures all of the images, but it won't capture any secondary links. So if you want to capture any links, like where an image may point to, for example, is stored, but not the end destination. So if it points to like google.com, we're not capturing also a copy of google.com, just the image and where it points to on that day. All right, there's a follow-up question. Yeah, perfect. Yes, Melissa. So this is a great question. And yes, this is why some of those features were built were specifically for those types of investigations. So if you're working on a CSAM or sex trafficking case and the website deletes the images or a profile disappears or someone removes it, but you saw the images in Hunchly, you will always have a copy of those images in Hunchly. They'll always be permanently saved. So if you go back to the website and let's say you just go back to the website and the images are just broken now, right? Like it's just broken image links. You'll get a fresh copy of that page demonstrating the broken images, and you'll still have your old copy of the page with the original images in it. So once you saw it, you always have it, okay? Now there are exceptions to this where you're dealing with Instagram and Twitter and Facebook because they're not actually showing you a whole page at a time. So it's a bit of like a sleight of hand trick. It looks like a whole page you're scrolling down, but you're not really. You're actually just cycling through images. So sometimes you have to deploy different strategies in different places, but definitely if you've seen something like typical trafficking investigations, once you see it, those images are yours permanently. And then of course you can take it to Griffi or your Project Vic enabled tools or other things that can help with that as well. Cool. Hopefully that helps to answer that. All right, perfect. And yes, CSAM work and sex trafficking, we did lots and lots and lots of consultation early on because that's a lot of where imagery work is done in investigations. Cool, all right, we have about 12 minutes left. Let's move on here, have a quick sip. All right, I know I'm a noisy gulper. What we're looking at now is the searches tab. This is really just a nice convenience thing, and it's also a way to encourage an investigator to be a bit more thorough. And what I mean by that is when I look at the searches tab, what it's telling me is what search engines I'm using and what I'm punching into them. So we're monitoring all the major social media platforms and search engines, looking for the keywords you run into them and the search operators, and just displaying them to you. Now, the first problem I've seen here is that I've only used Google, right? So if I'm ever stuck in an investigation or I just kind of like get that sense, like I feel like I've looked for everything, I often remember that, hey, if I go into the searches tab, it's probably going to tell me that I've got some search bias, right? I'm doing everything on Google. It's a good reminder to go run those keywords into Yandex, or maybe turn your internet on first as well. Let's try that on for size. Perfect. So if we run Justin Seitz here, I don't know what happened there. What is that? What's going on here? It's got no results, or it's not going to let me. I don't exist in Russia anymore. So you can see the results are different, right? Like the first one is a pirated copy of one of my books, then my Twitter. So you can see already we're seeing things that there, and wow, a lot more images of my friend in Cincinnati, it looks like. So the thing is that just by running the exact same keywords in a different spot will give you different results, right? So this searches tab is really going to try to help bring that forward to you, tell you where you're running things, and maybe encourage you to run your searches somewhere else. And you can always clean them up too if you don't want them, remove them, or if you don't want some of them, or if you kind of use it as a to-do list. Cool. We will move on to the data tab. So the data tab is really useful. It's showing you any opportunity that Hunchly was able to pluck out a little piece of intelligence from a web page. This might be something like a tracking code for a Google Analytics tracking code that's been discovered. So for example, Google Analytics codes are useful for pinning down ownership of domains. There might be email accounts that it's discovered. So as we're browsing, it's picking off email accounts in the content of the pages. We're able to actually filter on those as well. So we can say, show me all the pages that had tim.deschant at arstechnica.com. It's showing you there. The other really cool thing is that you're able to use this now in other tools, right? So Hunchly's extracted a Google Analytics code for you. Now you can run to another tool like Spy on Web or Risk IQ or some other public www and run these little codes in them to see if you can get other hits or expand your searches. Naturally, they're great pivot points in Multigo and other tools as well if you're doing cyber research or other work in them. Okay? Now, do we have any questions about the data tab or searches that I can help to answer right now? I'll give everyone a moment. I know I've been like hurling information like crazy. Are there any projects going to capture video or audio, at least search them to allow them to be saved? Do you mean like in terms of open source projects, or are you referring to like in-house projects here at Hunchly, I guess? Yeah, so none that I'm aware of. I mean, the reason why we don't extract audio and video is just simply because if you look at YouTube DL or other things, right? Like even open source tools have run into the legal issues and other things. So we do have webinars where I cover how to cover, building a YouTube downloader to follow Hunchly around. That's largely, I think how we're going to have to approach those in the future is you're going to have a core tool or two and then you're going to have to expand them to deal with the various legal or jurisdictional issues, even things like downloading video. Cool, yes. The data tab will also show you dark websites as well. So as you're browsing around, if you encounter any onions, it'll show up in a list here as well. You bet. Is that data automatically generated, or are there some dependent, is it dependent on the tags you've created? The data is automatically generated. It's based on regular expressions. So we're just running regular expressions against the content. If you ever wanted to hack Hunchly, you can change these regular expressions or actually add your own data extractors. You will have to edit the Hunchly SQLite database. So this is not warranty covered. We can't help you if you bork this, and it is not covered by support. But there's a Hunchly SQLite database. If you're a more technical user, you can jump into that sucker, and in there are our data extractors and patterns. Awesome. Great question. Fantastic question. If you go and clean up older unnecessary pages, do you keep a log of what has been deleted? You bet we do, David. So every time you delete a page or do a deletion activity in Hunchly, when you do this, it generates a deletion log. The deletion log does not include the full content, but it includes all the metadata that would be required for you to speak to it in court. Why did you delete this, or what is it? Is going to be your own argument. But what we provide to you is a log that says on this day and time, this artifact was deleted from Hunchly. Okay? So yes, David, we had to do that actually for our EU customers, and then slowly but surely it filtered its way to North America that a deletion log was important. We're also looking at ways of excluding it in an export because some people have requested that as well. All right, okay, I'm just cycling through some more questions. Perfect. Yeah, the next question on how to capture videos, my suggestion, honestly, as an investigator to investigator, is learn how to download videos in a handful of different ways. So I'm going to find the OSINT Combine. I'm going to send this to all of you because this is worth looking at. Okay, so I recommend this to everyone. Get comfortable with being able to extract video. And on some platforms, it's not even like you're just downloading a video file anymore. It's just not the same as it used to be. So this post right here, which I will send to you all in the chat, will teach you how to do that. And I think that the other important thing is that, yeah, you can bolt tools onto Hunchly. You can use other tools to download video. I think that it's just one of those things. The platforms can get a little aggressive with shutting tools down, as we've seen. And so we don't want to run into a spot where the Hunchly Chrome extension ends up getting killed. Cool. All right, so I had a question about go on Facebook and it doesn't record the page properly. So it's a bit of a misnomer. Actually, it is recording the page. I'll use Instagram here. So what happens on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook has its own different issues, but I recommend if you can use the mobile version. I hit the wrong keystroke, sorry. Let me go back. So what happens when you're browsing through Hunchly, Instagram with Hunchly, and Twitter and Facebook is this content, what you see right here, as we scroll and go down, more content gets loaded, right? It looks like we're scrolling down a whole web page, but we're actually not. What you're not seeing is that at the top of the page, Instagram's unloaded those images, okay? So when Hunchly takes a capture right now, if I force a capture even right now, you would expect that those pictures at the top of the page, way up there, are gonna still be there, but they're not, because Instagram has actually unloaded them. So as an investigator, you keep scrolling down, Hunchly's doing its thing, right? You keep going, you're like, cool, Hunchly's capturing everything. But what Hunchly's doing is capturing the view of the page at the time, which is accurate, right? So this is accurate. It's a true representation of what the page is at the time of capture. But the problem is when we go into our capture here, what we get instead is this big, blank, gray area. Where the hell are all of, there they are. Because this is actually what Instagram's doing, is backfilling the content with just a big block. And so we only get to capture what's viewable here in the now. So the thing is it's actually, and this is not me being a product defender, Hunchly's actually doing its job. If we froze the browser with developer tools right now, and went up in the page, you'd see there's no images there. So Hunchly is doing what it's supposed to do, but it's not exactly what we want it to do as an investigator. Now, there are some browser hacks you can do, and I know people have done them, and there used to be a JavaScript snippet that would block the unloading of those images, and I have one myself I've done. Not a great idea, but what you can do with Hunchly to work around this is we have a setting, and this setting is right here, page capture sensitivity. You put it to all changes. Okay, so if I have to dive off into an Instagram account or Facebook or Twitter, I set it to all changes. Now, honestly, I don't run into this issue ever because I don't preserve entire social media accounts, ever. Not like this, right? Because I've never, in the history of the years I've been doing this, I've never once seen it ever go to court, an entire whole profile and get reviewed, right? So I always capture just the content I need and ensure that the context, meaning comments, previous posts, things that are important, real investigative work, right? Like make sure you have the stuff you need in context and is captured. So I also want to just remind folks that capturing an entire, scrolling down through an entire account, you probably want to look at either building some automation or a product like X1 that is designed to kind of do this full capture, like an automated tool to suck down a whole account. All right, so all changes beta. Just that's my own personal thing, and I love to discuss this with people, but I've yet to hear a good challenge to, or a very good defendable reason for downloading an entire account. And often in jurisdictions in the EU, it's dissuaded from doing that because it's the privacy rules are getting tighter and tighter. So what I'm going to do is restart my browser because I pushed that new setting. Now, what's going to happen now is as we browse down, Hunchly's capturing is going to be much more aggressive. It's going to capture constantly. Every time there's an unload or reload, you're going to see it glow orange, and that's capturing because it's unloading and reloading and unloading and reloading. Now, what you are not going to get is one nice, big, long, clean, continuous capture because Instagram is not giving us a big, long, continuous capture. That's not what this is, right? The web page only has 12 images max at a time on it. That's it. You can go read the code. It's interesting. But what Hunchly's doing is it's generating a pile of captures so that it never misses any images that get loaded or unloaded, right? So content in the middle now, but it'll be blank below, right? And blank a little bit above, but the capture below it will have more content above, the capture below it will have more content above it. So you kind of get this stretched out timeline as you scroll down as Hunchly is doing all of these captures. So you won't miss anything. You're not getting what used to be on Instagram. You could get like a full one single page capture. That doesn't exist anymore because you don't have a full page in Instagram. They don't use that old technology anymore. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all using the technology or very similar technologies like React, which kind of load things into a small container and then you cycle through them. It's not a big long web page, even though it feels like one. So hopefully that helps. I know lots of people run into this issue at one point or another. And then honestly, what I do personally is I close my browser and I turn it off. I just turn it off. That's it. I go back to my regular browsing. So everybody develops their own muscle memory around how to handle these things. The reason why I don't leave it on all the time is it will generate a pile of captures, tons and tons and tons. All right. So I spent a bit of extra time there kind of explaining that, but that is an issue that you will run into. You'll run into a website someday where you're like, why is the capture showing like big blank areas instead of content? And definitely we've seen more websites taking up that newer technology, and we are going to be adjusting in the future how we do some of these things. But for now, that's kind of the best way to mitigate that. All right, cool. Now we hit the top of the hour. And I know everybody's still hanging in there for the most part. I'm going to cover exports very briefly since we already covered some of it, but it is important for you. I'm not going to cover report building, but it is important for you to know that there are a couple of ways to get pages out of Hunchly. That is not just a full case export. Lots of times you just want to export a page or two. So what you can do is you can go into this custom export menu, page export, Now you can see the value of having tags or important markers, right? If I just want the important pages, I can select them. By clicking this, this is going to produce both the PDF and the HTML of this page. Yes, we do produce PDFs. Now, PDFs are not web pages. They were not ever designed to display web pages. So what I always tell folks is the PDF is great because it's got some metadata, right? But you might not always get the cleanest result from a PDF when you convert, right? So here, this actually doesn't look too bad, you know, but it's not really like truthfully what we saw when we were browsing, right? But it's the closest thing a PDF will get. Whereas with an HTML, you're going to get a much cleaner document, a much better capture, and it only requires a Chromium-based browser to open. So this is much more accurate to what we saw. And again, you see these lazy loaded images, right? It used to be on Insta or LinkedIn when you fire up a profile, all the images start to come in. Now you'll note that you have to scroll down and get into the content as they bring more content forward. It's just changing times in the web. All right, so that's how you can produce pages like that. You can also just select pages from in here, pick a page in your history view, and you can say page export. Same deal, we'll give you PDF and HTML. Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to scroll up. And you can also, from within your page review screen, export pages, HTML or PDF. Okay, you can be more selective here. So again, everybody's going to have to export pages at one point or another. That's a quick and easy way of doing that. We have other things that you can export in our selective export option, right? So you can export pages and images. You can export your notes in a single PDF if you want, all kinds of stuff in there as well. All right. So really, that is the front to back, the in and the out of capturing, investigating. We spent a bit more time on some of the nuances of Instagram and some of the new kind of styles of technology. We did not get to report building, but the important thing to remember is that our knowledge base is maintained. We update it all the time. We add new materials to it as support.hunch.ly right in here. So anything that I covered today will be in here as well. How to use tags. Building reports, for example, is right here. It's a video, there's some instructions, very simple to follow. We also have a full text search engine in Hunchly that I didn't even dive into today. It's got a Google-like operators, plus, minus. You can do very specific searches within the fields in Hunchly. All of the EXIF metadata from your images is stored there too. So you can do searches for like BlackBerry, and BlackBerry actually returned a hit in an image and a hit on a web page. So stuff like that. So we got a lot of information in our knowledge base. If you're interested in expanding Hunchly, again, hunchly.training is where our courses are. That's where you can take courses. They are paid, but they're inexpensive. So if you've never written code before, we can actually teach you how to do some pretty neat stuff with Hunchly without code, using data forwarding, or with Python, which is my fave. And Phil is amazing Python slinger, and Ginger is also has another course coming too very soon. So that's also cool. And you can go to youtube.com/C-Hunchly for our channel where everything else is. Anything else that I can help you with or our team can help you with, it's just support@hunch.ly. And for those of you that want to stick around for a couple of extra minutes who are interested in Maltego, I will just fire it up very briefly here. I won't spend a ton of time, but I'll fire it up and we can just take a look at it. So to those of you that had to leave, thank you so much for sticking around. I appreciate it. And definitely, I hope to see you in a future session. For those of you who are going to stay, let's see what we got in the Hunchly After Dark session here. So, I don't see any other questions. I'm going to take a quick coffee sip here, actually. All right, that was like a triple coffee sip. Cool. So really, the cool thing with Maltego is that it is a tool where you do investigation visually using link analysis and things called transforms. So how you use Hunchly and Maltego together are what's called transforms. Transforms are little bits of code that run to bring data into Maltego. We have transforms that are available for people. You can download and install them. We're not going to cover that, but I will fire up Maltego and show you how the two tools can work together. All right, so here's Maltego. Maltego is a paid tool. There's also a community edition. The paid version is about $1,000 a year Canadian, I think, somewhere in there. Not an inexpensive tool, but it is widely used and well adopted. Okay. Someone just asked, how frequent are you expecting to be able to do these sessions? I do them once a week. So this week it's a Hunchly desktop training. Next week I'm going to do a Hunchly Maltego. Week after that might be another desktop session, depending on demand. It's also people come to them for training. So new customers that sign up come to these training sessions, even though they kind of dovetail off into other stuff. So once a week we put out a webinar. Generally, that's our cadence. Unless it's summer, then things kind of go squirrely. All right, so in Maltego, we operate off of what's called a graph. So I'm going to create a new graph. Now, it is really kind of a complex interface to use this tool. So don't worry too much about like getting a Maltego 101 here. But what we do is when you bring a transform or a set of transforms or entities in, you show up on the left-hand side. Entities are simply objects in a Maltego graph that tell you what you're looking at. So in this is a Hunchly case. So when you bring in the Hunchly transforms, we also get Hunchly cases, Hunchly pages, and other things you can bring onto your graph. Now, if you remember, our Hunchly case was Justin Seitz in Hunchly. So I'm going to go Justin Seitz. Cool. Okay. Now, what we can actually do is now we can pull information from Hunchly onto our graph. So what I can do is I can right-click, and I can go local transforms, Hunchly transforms, get Hunchly pages. So what this is doing, there we go. There's all the pages we browse to. Okay, so this looks like, you know, if you ever see those crazy, you know, terrorism charts in a movie, that's what we're kind of building, a link analysis chart, right? Where they have like all the people connected to everybody. Well, we have our Hunchly case, and here are the pages that we captured in our Hunchly case. But there's actually some really cool stuff we can do with it. Like we can do, I'll just get rid of these. In Maltego, there's what's the notion of a machine. A machine is basically something that takes a bunch of transforms and runs them one after the other. And Hunchly actually ships with a machine. So it's called a full case extraction. So what this is going to do is actually go through, grab every page, every photo, every piece of EXIF metadata, every selector it can find, all this stuff. And it's like a little robot that's building up our Hunchly case, but visually representing it in Maltego. So it's going to look a little messy because there's a lot of stuff, right? There's images and there's things all over the place. So you can see a single Hunchly case, even with a handful of pages, produces a ton of information, right? It's pretty cool. Now, again, this might be a little overwhelming to you if you've never seen Hunchly in action, but I can show you a more specific use case. So just clean this graph back up and I'll pull the pages back in. And this is all just running locally on my machine. There's no internet connection required because it's just talking locally to my Hunchly installation. So I'm going to run the page transforms again, or sorry, I'm going to run the photos transform. So I'm going to say, give me all the photos you have, which apparently is probably more than I wanted. Maybe not. Oh, looks good so far. No, that's not what I wanted to run. I apologize. Let me do this another way here. I want to go like this. I want to get the pages first so you can see the connection between pages and photos. Let me show you. Cool. So we have the pages that we've collected. Okay. We can see the URLs here. Perfect. So there's the OSINT Combine one. We can pull this over to here if we want. And now this is where we can say, like, get the page data, if there is any. And here's the Google code, right? So now we have this Google Analytics code over here. So I can convert this into a more usable Maltego entity. So infrastructure, I think there's a tracking code type. So now I'm going to convert this to a tracking code type. And now I can actually right click on it again, and I can go all transforms. And I can say like other sites with the same code. Can it find me other websites that have the same Google Analytics code, right? So it might build out my intelligence from here, just from one little piece of extracted data that now it didn't find any other for me in this particular case. But that's an example of where you can grab something, isolate it out of a page in Hunchly. There may be images as well. that we can pull out. So let's see, I can't remember which one was this looks like my Yandex search result. Get photos for page. We should see some photos come in here. You can click on the entity and inspect it. So it'll tell you the hash of the photo, where it came from, the local file, where you can find it on disk. Okay. So again, this is just a little 5-10 minute walkthrough of like, start up a Hunchly case, do your thing. You can pull it into Maltego, and you can then start going through and doing some more pivoting. You can peel off images, tracking codes, IP addresses. Sometimes you have to do some, and Andy covers this in his other webinar. But sometimes you need to do things like convert these into a native Maltego type, and sometimes they're like images in particular. You want to make sure that you see them show up like this. But you can also like grab entire chunks of images and convert them. Either way, I'm going to do an entire webinar on just playing around with getting started with kind of capturing pages in Hunchly and then pivoting off of it into other stuff. And naturally, as you capture, you can kind of leave Maltego running if you want. And as you capture more pages in Hunchly, you can continue to pull them into your Maltego graphs. Okay, and we're also building some new ones. So we have some new transforms coming that uses the new style Maltego technology. All right, and yes, someone had also said before on reverse image searching. So one thing I'll do is I'll like find a page that's interesting. I'll pull all the images out using the transform, and then you can like right click and go TinEye reverse image search for similar images, search for pages linking to. So this will pull back any results. Could be a ton linking to that particular item, right? You'll see in the bottom right, it's running. And up here, this is a gotcha in Maltego. I have it set to 12. If you only have it set to 12, that's all it's going to display. So for example, our Hunchly pages were a little dwarfed. So this is again a gotcha when you first start using Maltego. We had captured more than just that handful of pages. I just want to show you again here. I slid this slider right here. The big boy version, I think, the big version of Maltego goes up to 10K, and I think the bigger one, the enterprise, goes up to like, it'll display, I can't remember how many nodes in your graph for you. But it is important to note that if you have pages, like tons of pages, you're going to want to slide that slider up and make sure. But I usually keep it in like the 256 range for most stuff. Otherwise, it gets cluttered and I really don't run into it. But you will note that your graph will change. Oh, it's telling us about collections. We're not going to get into that. So now it's actually giving us a collection because there's more than 12 pages, right? So we were only able to see 12 before, but I can pull this sucker out if I want and just run a transform on this Bellingcat page. We know that there was photos on that page that had EXIF metadata, for example, right? In here. So again, these are Hunchly images. Hunchly images are different than Maltego images. It's just due to the nature of the beast. You do have to kind of keep, it's again, a much longer discussion, but you can convert them to image. They should start filing in as images as it converts them over. You can start running transforms against them, like extract EXIF metadata directly. So right here, I can say standard transforms, all transform to EXIF info. There you go. It actually pulled my phone out. There's the EXIF metadata. This is Hunchly that did that. So now I can go in and I can actually double click on this phone and look at the properties. So it's telling us about the phone that took the picture. Pretty cool. And the EXIF metadata shows up right in the image right here in the properties. And then again, I can pivot off of this and go TinEye, reverse image search for similar images, and now it'll go off and try to find similar images that I could find on the web, right? And I can keep pivoting, you know, pivot, and I can jump back into my browser and keep investigating from there. All right, I think that's all the questions that I've addressed most of the Maltego related stuff that I can that's come up. All right. Yeah, so the Maltico cost is not monthly, it's annually. So it is a bit of a big hit up front, but check out the community edition. The community edition might do everything you need to do and it's free. The other thing is if you want to get your hands dirty with some link analysis, you don't need Maltico. They have a free tool called Perturba Case File. Actually, I don't think they're called Perturba anymore. Maltico Case File, sorry. So Maltico Case File is just a manual version where you build the graph manually yourself or by importing CSVs. So that's also a great start. I know what it's like when you're first starting out a business. When I first started Dark River Systems, I couldn't afford Maltico. So even like Hunchly was written, and I think I had to buy Maltico a year after Hunchly was released because it was an expensive tool. I think we've covered everything. We got about 20 minutes over, but we covered more Maltico stuff here at the end. Thank you all for hanging out. I don't see any more questions. So I'm going to end the session here. I really appreciate all of the questions and hanging out and all of that. We'll see you next week. I'm going to be covering more kind of Hunchly Maltico stuff, a little bit slower and more installing it and some of the other things there. But thank you again, and I will see you hopefully on Twitter and other places. Bye-bye for now.